How about the mass global genocide of native peoples? The Native Americans weren't the first to fall victim of the East Indies trading companies. After the English first arrived in Virginia in 1607, the terrible drought and cold winters were a major struggle beyond what they were prepared for. They pressured the natives for relief, which led to an escalation of conflicts along the James River, eventually escalating into a heated conflict in the fall of 1609, over 2 years after their arrival. Natives attacked the English fort through the winter of 1609 to 1610, and it didn't take much to intensify what the English called the starving time. Things start out small before they end up big. This would have been the natives' best time to win the war. With little effort, the natives could have just killed every last one of them, but they let them live. After the arrival of reinforcements, the English retaliated viciously and mercilessly, giving natives their first taste of devastation tactics borrowed from all Britain's history of war, burning the native villages and executing women and children. The English eventually won the battle, pushed the natives back a little, but things had been stirred pretty hard, so the battles had just begun. The English were shot with arrows, while children of defeated natives were drowned in the James River. 2 years later, what really happened to Pocahontas? Which is actually a derogatory or obnoxious nickname, meaning spoiled child or naughty one. Her actual name is Matoaka. Her chrono was about 17 years alive. 17 years since she was born. Just a young girl. When the British found out the chiefs came through the matriarchal side of the family, the mother's side, and that young Pocahontas was the favored daughter of Chief Powhatan, on the 13th of April, 1613, English Captain Samuel Argall kidnapped Matoaka. The East Indies trading companies were notorious for kidnapping and enslaving people, kind of like Maximus in the Gladiator movie. Matoaka was basically kidnapped, captured while on a social visit to Jamestown, which she had done regularly. Things seemed safe enough and no current apparent danger or conflict. Matoaka was held hostage or prisoner of war, and as a prisoner for ransom at Jamestown for over a year. Chief Powhatan had been given many names, and among his people commonly went by his personal name, Wahasenekaw. Chief Powhatan ruled over 30 Native American tribes with nearly 500 tribal members per tribe, which inhabited the area around the Jamestown settlement. In Hawaii, they recognized the tribal leader there of all the tribes as a king. And for lack of a better word, Chief Powhatan was the king, according to the Native American people. Another thing that's been left out of our history books and out of the public school system is the fact that Matoaka had already married a young son of another chief who was supposed to become the next chief and likely king after Powhatan. And she had her first child with her first husband, a daughter named Keoki. And prior to being kidnapped herself, her would-be chief husband was singled out and killed. The young Matoaka was basically kidnapped at a young age, held for over a year, and as a condition of her release, was manipulated and forced to marry 28-year-old widower named John Rolfe, who took a special interest into the attractive young prisoner. Forced to marry the man who we can thank for commercializing tobacco. Not quite the picture painted by Disney? No. In fact, several native members from her tribe informed Walt Disney of actual events that took place, which were not in harmony with his version, but he did not comply. Disney couldn't sell the true horror story under his fairy tale label. This was in the middle of the first Native American struggle with England. To make matters much worse for the Native American people, at the same time, they used the marriage of Matoaka to John Rolfe as leverage to strike a peace treaty with Chief Powhatan, which would not be lived up to. It's true that Matoaka quickly integrated the English language as well as the teachings of Jesus Christ. Her name was changed to Rebecca during her baptism ceremony, as if it were a condition of her baptism. And she was married to John Rolfe right after, April of 1614. And it wasn't just her, but many natives of her tribe were the first Native Americans to quickly integrate the English language and to recognize Christ. These Native Americans were also related to the Cherokee. Some of the Cherokee, and other tribes as well, had lighter hair and skin, and some even had blue eyes. These groups broke off much earlier. Many of them were advanced enough in their intelligence to eventually blend into English culture as the events would eventually require. 2 years later, the spring of 1616, John Rolfe took her to London, where the Virginia Trading Company of London used her beauty to promote the company and the colony formed in America. Look at the beautiful natives we get to do commerce with. March of 1617, Rolfe and Matoaka and their 2-year-old son hopped on a ship that was to sail back to Virginia. And right at Gravesend, England, which is very close to London, it's right in the channel, they really hadn't gone anywhere at all. When Matoaka suddenly had to be taken off the ship, she tragically died right there, March 21st, 1617, at the chrono of around 21 years young, at Gravesend, England, which is very close to London. It has been suspected that Matoaka was intentionally poisoned since then, contrary to what Disney portrays. The great Chief Powhatan was described by John Rolfe and many others as having an absolutely amazing physique, capable of performing any kind of labor. The great chief died the following spring of 1618, some say in despair. Others suspect he was poisoned too. I may have a biased opinion on the matter, since I'm a direct descendant of Chief Powhatan, and Pocahontas, and Keoki. Another thing I must say at this point is that I know of no greater writings to detail the dangers of what happens when the hearts of the people are stirred up into anger than the writings of the more ancient Native Americans from just before and after the time of Christ. And I urge everyone listening not to allow their hearts to be stirred up into anger, especially with what's happening with the current and next world events. I wonder if I'm also part Jaredite because the book of Ether, chapter 12, verse 27. And if men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness, that they may be humble. And my grace is sufficient for all men that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me and have faith in me, then will I make weak things become strong unto them. I just came across this recently, but not by accident. Isn't this a perfect example of different words, but the same principle? So there you have it. Bummers to woohoos. The power of the Word of God is awesome. For a better understanding of our world history, study The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And also be sure to Google East India Company and just look at the history of slavery, and then indentured servants and kidnapping, which happened on a massive global scale, and the wars that spread over the globe, all for power and money. But you'll have to go deep to discover who the few elites actually were who were pulling the strings behind all that. Simply Google and study the history of the wealthiest and most powerful families in the world, like the Rothschild family. This is where the root of the corruption lies, with those at the top of it. Napoleon said, "We are either kings or pawns, emperors or fools." Without the laws of empowerment, this may seem rather cynical. However, from the perspective of the laws of empowerment, it becomes clear that we are all meant to be kings and emperors. An empire is a group of states, countries, or nations. And since we have duality in all things, I think there must be two types of an emperor or empress. Various levels, actually, between those who empower or enslave others. Those who empower, I think of as an empowerer, which may have something to do with where the name emperor actually originated from, and which I've personally accepted as one of the definitions of an emperor. In most parts of the world, most lineages like Japan, the word emperor was adopted and retrospectively applied to its past leaders. And like Japan, some of the oldest legends around the world reference heavenly ties.